Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Georgia Court, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's poetry reading, which I think should be a great deal of fun because we have three wonderful poets today. Before we get started, just a little bit of information. You all, if you are not a reader, have been brought in on mute. Don't feel dismayed by that. Once our poets have had a chance to read, we'll allow you to unmute so that you can engage in conversation with the poets. But keeping you on mute just keeps a lot of extraneous noise away from the event, dogs barking, doorbells ringing, et cetera, et cetera. So we want our full attention to be on our poets. In the chat function at the very top, you will see that there are links to purchase two of our poets' books. Martin Tucker's, one of his books is available, and Peter Schmitt, one of his books is available. So without any other further information that I think you need, we will go ahead and get started. Our first reader is Martin Tucker. Martin has published 6 collections of poetry and 6 works of literary criticism. And in fact, his poetry collection, Plenty of Exits, is available from Bookstore1, and that's the link on your chat today. Tucker's poetry, fiction, essays, and reviews have appeared in numerous publications, including The Nation, The New Republic, and the New York Times Book Review. Martin was the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Confrontation magazine for 42 years. He was professor of English and chair of the English department at Long Island University and served on the executive board of Penn American Center for 23 years. His plays have been produced and or stage read in London and in Tampa. Please welcome Martin Tucker.
Shall I begin, Georgia?
Yes, please. It is your turn. And you need to move your screen a little bit because we can't see your whole face. Down the other way, please. The other way. Thank you. That looks good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Georgia, for all the work you do for poetry. It really is greatly appreciated. I'm going to read a few poems. I'm going to start with a poem about my mother, since Mother's Day was just last week, and she often said I was always late. So being a week late, here's a poem about mother, or for Mother's Day. My mother's calendars. Every autumn, my mother would remind me to bring her a calendar out of fear she might forget a date she wanted clear for my visit into the space she walked from here to there. She asked for an illustrated pad, animals or babies of brawling cheer, pictures changing silent hours into something particular, like a lake with an egret on it, its leg lifted high, a fancy of pink sky, because I was coming to visit. I count 17 calendars on my desk now, and it's not even September. I look at the pictures crowding my space, virgin sheets without a mark on them. To whom should I send my plenty of pictures? Does my mother need a calendar up there? Is she still worried about missing our appointments? I'm going to read a few poems that have to do with place. Poets and writers are influenced or rather inspired by place as well as people. And so some of these just sort of came into my mind for the reading. They sort of coalesced. And so three of them are local and one is universal, a universal place. The first poem is Payne Park, which is a park in Sarasota. Um, and I often went there to a cafe that sits atop a hill, and it's next to the skateboard uh, rink. And I would hear the noise and see uh, the people riding high. So this is Payne Park or Payne Park skating board. T-shirts of fleeting colors, logo mobiles swirling by, baseball caps marching backward in preparation for an upward climb, striplings repeating their grace, the clack of the jump as they come on board after deserting their solid base. The, the the slicing of a run to the waiting air, immeasurably judged by their appointed peers. Like a movie of bro romance, identity of siblings soloing in an afternoon of sky blue youth. This next poem is about Selby Gardens, about the Buddha Lagoon, or what I call the Buddha Lagoon. There's a lagoon very near the entrance, and at one end of it sits a Buddha, and the fish swim by. So at the Buddha Lagoon in Selby Gardens. The fish come to the edge of the lagoon. They open their mouths in supplication. I tell them the rule against feeding. They swim by, almost touching me. Silver striped, black, pink, and the brilliant orange, waiting, willing to dare the prohibition, and I afraid to roil the ripples that feed my being. Opening my sandwich from its tightness, I take the fancy into my bareness. I feel their lips near touching mine. And for a few weeks now, I have walked by what I call a deserted parking lot, although there are a few cars within it. And in front of the lot is a white picket fence. And I just found it so odd, depressing, or whatever you want to call it, to have a beautiful picket fence in front of a deserted lot. And out of that feeling came this poem. A white picket fence painted brightly with no house behind it. Can one find a home within its ken? Perhaps a frontispiece for a post-time of desire, an English folly, a ruin shored scarlet with bricks partnered by ivy, groundwork for grasp of a slower time. But today, a parking lot with few cars in it. The realtor will comply with any dream, a big deal, or even a homely one, more likely a treasure of a supermarket, a mall of containment for any season. I walk beside the gravel in contemplation, dreaming no pebble will grow as tall as a tower. And this one has no location or can be any location. Home to me is a company of listeners sitting down to a cup of tea, tasting the leaves falling outside the window. A trail winding up a morning, seeding ground to succession of song in a soft bed of keeping. A mystery seeped in wells of upcoming, spooned over brews stirred to memory. Home is soil satisfied. And I'd like to read a few poems that I say were inspired by reading other poets. I think poets, writers, everybody gets inspired, sometimes influenced by the poets and the writers that they read. And sometimes writers will try to imitate or imitate a poet they've read in order to learn new techniques, gain insight into form. And sometimes they're just in sync with the spirit of the poet they've read. So this is a poem to a poet that I haven't read very much of, but I bought a book of his and read it. And then I just felt the need to try to write a poem like him. It's called after J.C. Powys. John Cooper Powys was a Welsh poet, very popular some years ago, but not popular now. After J.C. Powys. I will come back to your duvet, believe you me. I will come back to your smile, believe you me. Remembering is guile, believe you me. Remembering is seeing within the sea, believe you me. Stucco nor stone nor occupied hours will keep me from returning the stars under which we climbed through a black night into a forest made welcome and danced in a town without light and ate brown rice, warming our fingers, and shouted out vows without speaking. I will come back to your duvet, believe you me, into a warren of gray shrunk by brick. Age-hardened savannas we once melted. It cannot crack memory's clay. I will come back to your duvet, believe you me, though the waves mock my maritime fancy. Then this next poem is after D.H. Lawrence, and it was written just very recently. And Lawrence was a writer I used to read feverishly, but haven't read lately. And yet, when I wrote this poem, I knew I was speaking in what I thought was the voice of, or what like D.H. Lawrence. Anyway, it's called After D.H. Lawrence. I asked her for a dance because she seemed lonely. It was my wedding day and I was dancing with everybody. I was at my heart's content. She hesitated as she stood from the table, a lovely lady spinster with cushions of silk and layers of classic print she wore as definition of her graduation. She died the next morning. I did not know she had a weak heart. We came back from our honeymoon, and my bride's mother gave me the news. Not to feel guilty, she counseled, though indeed I did, though indeed I knew not of her weak heart. Only the thought a maiden might like dancing, and she was a princess I could lead into a day's great belly of dancing. The
Uh,
scratch lingers close to a wound, such hubris to think I was part of her death. My bride's mother told me the dead princess had a closet full of clothes never worn, blaring mauve and pastel sweaters, jackets rainbowed in orange and pink sunsets, dresses holding desire within flashing forms, and underwear a mother would condone with patience. The dances she danced then that day were a tumble of hangers and rods. If death came, no one could stop her from saying goodbye. This next poem is one.
Martin, could I just let you know you have time for one more poem?
Okay, then I will just say I'm going to skip this long poem on A.E. Housman and just go to what I did as my final poem. I want to write a poem that can be understood. There are mysteries enough in them that puzzle the longest. The shorn tree, the diner with a bare light above its counter, the laughing picnic, cliches that become our friends in remedy of challenge, familiars waiting at our shaky side, and batteries wrapping out a lifetime of use. It is age, of course, that once worn habits to press out wrinkles of clothing. Yet we, yet we the sentinels, yet we are the sentinels of transience, shipping out the eternals, like a poor crow's throat, raspy with repetition, but refusing to surrender its messages. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Our next reader is Frank Bubba Henson. So do people call you Bubba or do they call you Frank?
Bubba.
Bubba, okay. Bubba worked for MTV in the early 80s, and he co-founded the marketing company Seismic Communications. He also worked as a creative consultant for NBC, ABC, Sci-Fi Network, USA Network, Comedy Central, and ESPN. Bubba has an MFA in creative writing and poetry from Columbia University. And he has written for World Wrestling Entertainment and Golden Publishing, and is currently seeking firsthand experience with the people, events, and environments that shape our roles in the telling and retelling of this great story. And I assume you mean the wrestling story by that. Is that correct?
I mean life.
You mean life. Okay, then we will turn it over to Bubba.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you very much. And thank you for doing this. I just want to say that Bookstore1 has a very robust program of live events with authors, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And I think it's great that you've kept that alive during this time, during the pandemic. And thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody that's here. I feel like we're at a summer lawn party and it just rained and now we've all run into the screen porch and we're going to talk and get together there. I really appreciate you being here. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with something that's shiny and then we're going to descend into some intensity and then we'll come back into the light. But I first need to tell you that I made a little bit of a mistake when I signed up for this and I sent Georgia an old bio of mine and it left off the absolute most important thing, which is teaching. And I became a teacher late in life It's something that I wish I had done sooner. I absolutely loved it. And I'm really honored and happy that a lot of my students are here with me now. And I'm going to do something real quick. Please bear with me. If I forget you, because I haven't been able to see you, I want to say hi to Sparko, Matthew the Murphy, Kendalacious, who became Gray, not to be confused with Andrew the Gray, Paul Stamul, The Bookage, Master Blaster, X, Lily Messina, Little Messina, Hannah Delo, Tegeler, Amelia von Lillian Buchlich, The Fleisch, The Comet, Katniss, Booyah, that's you, Nicole. And even though I didn't teach them, there's also in there the Martin girls, Aurelia and Lakin, and there's Sally the Rose is here, and Elise, and I may have missed some people, but there's a point in me doing that, and that is that when I taught, it was actually a mnemonic device of mine. The way I remembered all my kids was by giving them a nickname. But there's one kid that I didn't give a nickname to, and this poem is about that kid. It's also a type of poem I should mention. It's called a hypophora, which is a form of poetry that asks questions that it also answers. There's also a reference in this poem to the samurai moral code called Bushido. So the name of this poem is for the kid whose name is number 5 in my grade book. You're the one who swallowed the magnets, right? Who announced every time when he returned from the bathroom that he hadn't passed them yet? No, that wasn't you. Nor were you the girl with the hair in her eyes who drew purple unicorns during class incessantly, sloth-like gestures to reach for her jail pens, drew the same unicorn while I lectured, never spoke, failed everything, but smiled when I told her I loved them until one day her chair was empty, hospitalized, we learned, but not before she snuck into my classroom and left a purple unicorn on my chair. Were you the kid who taught me to throw cards with velocity as weapons, whose name was a palindrome, thus making you a form of ionic meter? Whoever you were, I imagine at some point I shot you with a rubber band gun, hopefully leaving marks, while I recited the poetry I love most and explained how take that to understand the rhythm. Let us go then you and I, and take that, how the voice brings us to a new understanding. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. You might have been there for any number of miracles, say, to watch the boy who became invisible when called on, because he preferred to make life-size samurai armor out of cardboard. How he invented the way to deliver his final public speech, his personal Bushido, by closing his eyes at the podium to recite his speech blindly before the witness of his classmates and parents. The way of the warrior. Might you have been there when I reduced all of the quartiles assessments and diagnostics of the SATs, ACTs, and Common Core down to the successful punctuation of an adverbial clause? Repeat after me. When I got up in the morning, comma, I loaded my rubber band gun, and I became an academic Khaleesi, breaker of ADD and ADHD chains, thus freeing my dragons to resume memorizing air traffic schedules, World War II battles, and the tensile strength of a lizard's toe pads. Did you put your head on the desk when I turned out the lights on a rainy day and circled the room as I read To Kill a Mockingbird aloud and gave it the juice when Atticus shot the dog or Scout spied Boo behind the door? Were you the kid who asked if Boo was still alive? No, not you. You did more than that. You were the one who gave me permission to introduce 1,000 kids to Bob Dylan singing a 17th century ballad. You were there when we did steel cage debate matches over whether water is wet. You laughed at my faces. You listened to my stories. You came after class and cried, telling me how scared you were. I was scared too. And now that you're gone, the kid whose name is number 5 in my grade book, I can't even wander through memory or antiquity to find you. I can only offer this, a hypophora, as a small token of thanks for nothing less than helping me learn who I am. Perhaps one day you'll find me, and together we will pluck the silver apples of the moon and the golden apples of the sun before we climb into that magic boat whose wind will take us anywhere we want. Well, that was for you guys, all my students. And again, thank you so much for being here. Martin stole a bit of my thunder. He did a Mother's Day poem. Mother's Day just passed, and my mother has been gone for some time now. There was a time when she came to me and she was feeling bad about how she had performed as a mother. And so I wrote this for her to remind her of what she had done for us. I see no other way to settle this. I was mothered by a being whose grace bathes anyone and everything in godly trope, with visible registration in every shade, tone, and hue of the love spectrum, which incidentally mirrors the qualifications for immortality. But since you stand here reading, breathing, I will bet my life and my mother's and my children's lives that the entire universe's existence is not only dependent, nourished, encouraged, protected, and strengthened, but improved by this force of hers, this energy that some people strive a lifetime to obtain, manage, or master, or even briefly experience, but which she dispenses like Pez from the head of Mickey or Popeye or the Hulk to anyone, everyone, even you. You have feasted on her love and not even known it. So pity aside, humanity aside, and without even showing you the ingot of my soul stamped with her strength, I can look through you and all the way back to your birth and here again, and your triumphs, your losses, all the art and trash, sorted and weighed, valued and bonded. And it is my privilege to say unequivocally, my mom could kick your mom's ass. So it was a little pick me up there for my mom. Okay. I think we need stories and poems now more than anything. It's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that George has done this, because it has felt like life has just stood still for a while. And sometimes empathy will bring you to strange places. This is a poem called "The Worst Retail Location in the World." No, it's not in Chernobyl or on the down ramp to Dante's Last Circle of Hell. It's on a road called Fruitville, between antique and consignment stores. All your vaping needs, says the sign. No parking, no foot traffic. For over a month now, all day and night, not one buyer to be seen inside. One looks through the plate glass to an illusion. Mirrored walls create the infinity effect. Each image of him, alone at the counter, recreates itself over and over, smaller and smaller, until finally he is a grain of sand on this beach where I stand. The sun through the thin membrane of my eyelids, making silver electric light that mimics his shop. The planning, the savings, the terms of the lease, the worst retail location in the world. And now I am a partner in his space, where every day he invites me to inhale his dream, and I had no say in the whole idea. Yeah, that guy's killing me, I'll tell you. I'm ready to take up vaping just to go in there and give him some business. That's the tough thing about empathy. Like we're all in it together, even when it's a bad idea. This next poem is for my wife, Patricia. During the pandemic, I tipped extravagantly, took up cigars briefly and guitar, and made regular trips to the post office, seeking the newest stamp releases. My wife's cancer came back, and I went walking. I got an RV and traveled in that bubble. I wanted to go as far as I could. I wanted to hike in monstrous landscapes. I wanted to walk into the greatest isolation I could find. And when I returned to a moonlit apartment, a stack of mail on the counter, and Amazon boxes of all sizes dotting the floor, I climbed over the packages to find among them, just as new and unopened as all moments before this, my love, napping where she had sat up, waiting for me to come home. That was when I knew the pandemic was over. Yeah. Poetry for me, it's something that I really tried to teach my kids. I'm going to kind of speed up because I want to get two more in here. It really is a way of processing things, and I'm so grateful to be able to do this because it's really how I prefer to process things. And so, here is something that talks about how you might process something you saw when you were younger. It's called A History of Violence. When, once upon a time, the story you are telling grows wings in mid-word, and the fluttering you hear, the displacement of air beside your ear, is not the Bob White of your youth, but a great urgency, diving to the memory of a beating you saw on a subway platform, where a ring formed around a homeless guy whose naked torso, sweated and bristling with sinew and anger, took on two cops and bloodied their faces. They paid him back with billy club wax before it ended, him face down on the filthy platform. You've ruined brunch now with this story. As the wings beat about you, talons pinch your breast, lifting you out of your chair to climb in circles, air cold and colder, to the eyrie where you await every day, hungry for the memory to come back, to feed scraps of that violence into your open mouth, because your witness will never leave that nest. And this is my last poem. I told you I'd bring you back to the light. Sorry that we took a little dark detour there. It's a love poem. It's called Summer Flowers. During summer, we sleep in your thin bed. Under a cloud of cotton, we watch the window breathe dark into the room. And we listen as sound returns to source, vacuum of a chorus of stars humming one note, so true it enters our hearts and echoes there. Further and more distant, retrievable only as the seed of love. In fall, we shiver and listen for winter. We are bulbs in the frozen earth. Spring, we dance. Sorry about that. Spring, we dance. Ivy on the window wall attaches its mint to the room and distills the dawn chill until the sun becomes a stronger idea that we are slow to admit. As petals peel, we lie still and tingle. Our figures take shape, firmly in the showing, new and glistening. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bubba. That was wonderful. Our next reader is Peter Schmitt. Peter's the author of 6 collections of poems, excuse me, and one of them, entitled Goodbye Apostrophe, is available through the link that you'll find at the top of the chat if you scroll up to that, and you can purchase it through Bookstore1. Peter Schmitt has received the Lavin Award from the Academy of American Poets, selected by Richard Wilbur, the Discovery, the Nation Prize, judged by Anthony Hecht, Mary Jo Salter, and Nicholas Christopher, the Julia Peterkin Award from Converse College. He is a 2-time recipient of grants from the Florida Arts Council and was awarded a fellowship from the Ingram Merrill Foundation. His work has appeared in many leading publications, including the Hopkins Review, the Hudson Review, the Nation, and the Paris Review. A native Miamian, Peter Schmitt has taught creative writing and literature at the University of Miami since 1986. Please welcome Peter Schmitt.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Bookstore1, for making this event possible. It's a delight to be here. Thanks to everybody in attendance, and both right now and perhaps later on. Thanks going out, especially to Bubba's students for showing up. And it's a particular pleasure for me to be reading today with Martin and Bubba. Like my fellow readers today, I am a teacher, and the new book has a number of poems about students and teachers. I'm going to begin with one. It's the opening poem in the book. It's called The Sprinter, and it reflects something that I've been trying to bring across to my students for a long time, to not be afraid to confront the really hard issues in their lives. I think if you're going to be any kind of writer, you need to confront those difficult matters. This is The Sprinter. She ran track, was all I knew, a sprinter, and wordless at the back, seemed no more there than on days away traveling with the team. Her poems predictable, perfunctory, all false starts and pulling up too soon, never exceeding the line minimum, skinny on the page and always the single rush draft, as if writing were a race to finish as fast as she could. Subjects pedestrian, tedious, forgettable. For her, no doubt, as much as the reader. Until one day, late in the term, regionals looming, she dropped on my desk 3 solid pages of long, gripping lines, so much stronger than anything she turned in before, as though the language were compelled to rise to the occasion, and did, relaying with heart-stopped clarity just what her father had been doing to her for the past 7 years, and how no one knew, not even her mother. What I can't tell you, of course, is that from that moment forward, her life changed. He met justice, she found freedom, not because it didn't happen, but because it wasn't for me to know, and I didn't. And her writing the rest of that semester, as you'd expect, never as expressive again, nothing else summoning that force. But the poem had opened something in her. As she passed it to a coach who notified counselors, and she kept on competing, battling, which is how I'll think of her, springing away from her blocks, arms and legs churning, the head down, then slowly coming up as she'd been taught. Here's another poem about a student. You, as my colleagues here know, you remember some students for some reasons, you remember others for other reasons. Some you might not quite remember. Here's another student. I remember the poem's a little bit lighter. It's also a sonnet called Recommendation. Her poem touched me and it made me laugh. A sweet and witty elegy for her cat. And after she graduated, I wrote a long, enthused letter on her behalf when she applied to join the police force. Whatever possessed me later to Google her lines, finding she'd lifted them wholesale from an obscure British poet, my first thought was to write again to her sergeant. But then I stopped. She put one over on me, and I hope she wasn't patrolling the streets, assigned anything dangerous or urgent, but using her true talents at a desk, investigating fraud or identity theft. So it's a book of students and teachers, of religion and race, of childhood and family. The book is dedicated to my mother. Also, like Martin and Bubba, I've got a couple of mother poems here. Not really time for Mother's Day, but the book is dedicated to my mom. Here's the title poem. It's called Goodbye, apostrophe. And like so many poems, I suppose it asks of you a little visual imagination. Goodbye, apostrophe. You are barely hanging on at the top of the line by one curled fingertip. And now it appears you've fallen from the keypads of all the smartest phones. Forgive my possessiveness toward you. Goodbye, turn signal, hiding behind the steering wheel. Whatever indestructible composite you're made of, no one in this town seems to need you anymore. I don't know which way to go without you. Goodbye, incandescent light bulb. You took up all my energy, but these sinuous newcomers lack your warmth, your hominess. When the rare idea comes to me now, what flashes on above my head? Goodbye, Mom. When I went to pick up your ashes today, a squirrel darted beneath my car, then came out the other side, unscathed, as if there weren't room in the world for one more death, however small. My light, my direction, mine. Goodbye. You know, it was in the weeks after my mom's death that I was scribbling down these sort of random tributes to these various things that were disappearing, standard punctuation, traffic courtesy, although there's probably never been that in Miami. And it took a while before I had, so to speak, that sort of light bulb moment when I realized what I was really doing was trying to write an elegy for my mother. Once I made that connection, the poem happened. And here is one more for my mom. It's called The Little Blue Purse. It was a little blue purse she had asked for, my mother, age 4, when her father called from the Mayo Clinic with a silver chain. And he had somehow found one in a pawn shop in Rochester. And if he weren't so tired from the radium and the transfusions, from the talk of white blood cells, from the drive itself, that he might have noticed sooner that he'd left the purse at a small motel near the Canadian border. And so, with his family waiting for him, wife and 3 daughters, my mother the youngest, at the lake in Winnipeg Beach that summer, he turned back, though it would mean many more hours. She was kept, my mother, from his funeral, and her own mother allowed no photograph of him in the house. But my mother kept the little blue purse in a trunk she carried into adulthood with books and letters and clothes from her early years. And the trunk, too big for my parents' first apartment, was stored at my father's plant, where someone stole it. And the only thing my mother said she missed was the little blue purse. almost all of which had slipped from my mind out walking on the afternoon of her death, her body bagged and crematorium bound just hours before. And I had gone 100 yards more before realizing what I had just passed, sitting on a limestone wall at eye level, a purse that someone had discarded or lost. For all the world, a child's purse, cheap, plastic, and a light blue. When we were kids, we would swear on our mother's lives. What do I swear on now? But when I came around again, the purse was gone, the sky just turning from clear to dusk. I'm reading this next poem. It's actually not in Goodbye Apostrophe, but I'm reading this one actually for Martin. I don't know if Martin remembers, but almost 20 years ago, he published in his magazine Confrontation a sequence of 7 poems that I wrote about an active shooter situation that I found myself in the middle of here in the complex where I live in Miami. And I wrote this suite of poems, as I called it, in 7 different voices, each from a participant in this event, which resulted in the loss of 2 lives, and 2 people were critically wounded, including a policeman, and an apartment burned and gutted. And the poem I'm going to read from the sequence is the 3rd in that suite, which is called Incident in an Apartment Complex, a Suite of Voices. This is a poem called, this is from the voice of the wife of a guy that rode along with the police officer, the first one that responded to the scene that night. The poem is called The Widow. How many times did I beg Enrique, think about your children, your 3 little ones, if you don't intend to consider me. But he loved to ride along with his friend, on his back beneath some sweating belly of a car. All day I know he dreamed of it. The uniform, the badge, just like Carlos. So every other Monday night, he'd take shotgun in his buddy's cruiser and leave me sleepless in the dark. Luisa, he told me just days before, I'm going to sell the shop. And I knew he was serious by how happy he looked. But I never knew where that feeling came from. The adrenaline of the radio crackling, blue light pulsing. On weekends, the hours spent inside the hood of Carlos's car, the 2 of them pausing with beers. Could it have been companionship? Something he didn't even find with me? And now Carlos denies that Enrique was ever a passenger with him that night. To which I ask, how does Carlos explain his ending up in the wet grass? How it was we couldn't even have an open casket? Was my husband simply following Carlos like some ghost, as perhaps he follows him now? They pulled down the sheet and I made my ID the way that early mornings I would ease the covers down when he returned to me, not long before the children awakened. The next poem is from Goodbye Apostrophe. And you'll recognize from a couple of poems ago a detail in it. This is a poem about my mother's parents who fled the pogroms in Russia, came over, emigrated to Canada, met there and married. This is based on some of that history. The poem is called Pawnbroker's Widow, and it has an epigraph, Winnipeg, 1938. Neighbor merchants gathered outside their stores when the officers led her off in cuffs, my grandmother. to the open back door of the big black car, like the one she rode to her husband's burial 4 years before, who'd fled with her the pogroms, 41, dead of leukemia. He'd left her to manage alone 3 daughters, and as if betrayed, she'd wiped all trace of him from the house, banished so much as a photograph. She forbade the girls from the shop, now hers in trade, cameras, saxophones, brooches, golf bags, and she paid scant notice to the list the cops dropped off each week of local items swiped. She could read no English, though she could speak it well enough if accented, not yet, too much yet, like yet. Through iron bars, the rabbi offered a stiff, pale hand, ignored, and the lawyer did not stay long. It was only when a friend appeared just shy of bail that words came, not quietly, but language the men would never know or hear. What can they tell me of stolen things? By now, night had fallen. The children sent home early from school, waiting for her. Another hour, her jailers jangling their keys with a warning led her off. Nodding, she said nothing, knowing exactly how much such caution was worth. Georgia, do I have time for one more, or are we about out of time?
I'd say you have time for one more.
One more it is. Okay. Then I'll end with something considerably lighter. And this one is called The Condom in My Wallet.
Mhm.
And I trust Bubba's students are old enough to hear this.
They are.
I figured. I carried it for years before I lost, as we knowingly said then, the big V. Like the coin of a country I wondered if I would ever visit. I think it cost $0.25 from one of those gas station or junior high school boys' room vending machines, the male counterpart to the tampon. Though if anything, it only increased the flow of blood through my veins. A promise, commitment waiting to be kept. And in class, sitting at that metal desk, I seemed to feel it pulsing upward through my underwear and pants. So exquisitely tuned was my backside to its presence. It was there in the first place, tucked discreetly behind the learner's permit and cherished bubblegum cartoon, just in case, as some guy had told me I might need it, as he had heard from another, and so on. An endless chain of raging testosterone-driven prudence, experience, wisdom. And in just what sort of emergency, I'd ask myself, would it come in handy? A stuck elevator? A fair young maiden trapped in the dimming, air-starved shaft with me and succumbing to claustrophobia until I can save her by valiantly offering the distraction of pleasure? Did girls lug sponges, diaphragms, IUDs in that portable pharmacy called the purse? It wouldn't have mattered. The man prepared was the fortunate man, we had learned in Scouts. But looking back, the condom seemed more curse than talisman, languishing as the wallet slowly crumbled around it. Finally, one night, its moment arrived. But when I pulled it out, lubricated badly to begin with, the thing had ossified to nearly stone. When I stretched it in my hands, it shredded, and the girl just looked at me and shook her head. Preventer of pregnancy and disease, it had now prevented sex altogether, a newly discovered form of abstinence. Oh, thin repository of so much hope. The imprint left in imitation leather sized it up, like a 0 on a scorecard, batter out on strikes, ball still in the yard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I have just asked everyone on the call to unmute. So if you would like to have a conversation with one of our poets or ask a question or make a comment, please do so. Please unmute and
Just
I'm-
like to congratulate everyone. It was wonderful. I enjoyed all of it. And that last one was a riot. I'm glad I was muted. I was laughing so hard.
Thank you.
Bubba, I love you. And
Love you too,
great,
kid.
great job, all you guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for letting us in.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, Jim.
Look forward to the next one. Keep it up.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Yeah, other
Bye.
questions or comments? Some of you, I can't see your faces because you have your video off. So if you bring your video on and kind of wave at me, then I'll really know you want to ask a question. That could be very helpful. So I see Daniel Henson. Did you put your hand up to ask a question? You need to unmute yourself. I think I invited you to unmute. Can you unmute? I will do it again. Okay, more. Ask all to unmute. Okay. Can
Thank you for doing that. This is a question for all three of them. And although I share a last name with Bubba, it's really just as much for Martin and Peter, and I don't know the answer for Bub either. Do you strive for a creative rhythm with your poetry, or do you really go fallow for long periods of time before the muse strikes you?
All right. Well, I'll just say that it really kind of, it's like a wavelength that just strikes me, and it can, unfortunately, you have to have your antenna up all the time. I used to tell my students, it's really tiring. It takes a lot of guts to be a poet, because you really have to have your wavelength, you have to have your antenna up all the time. And that means you have to record it, because it kind of brings a voice with it. So I can never predict when it comes and goes.
Yeah, I would concur. The antenna is up, but not always receiving.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. I go through periods when I'm fallow, and then suddenly there's a rush of lines, poetry, and so on. I don't write every day. I don't write poetry every day, but I do write as soon as the ideas come.
Thank you.
Did I see someone else earlier who had wanted, Peter Leventhal, can you unmute yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
So I was Bubba's student in the 7th grade. And he was also my baseball coach. Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, I was just really touched. I sent you a really long email, but it just really, it just reminds me of, like, how wonderful writing is, just listening to all of this. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. You just really reminded me of how wonderful writing.
Pete, thanks so much. I can't tell you how much that means to me. It's so great to see your face. And you're writing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying.
Yeah. Keep it alive, dude.
Exactly.
Keep it alive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, you wrote me an email, so I'll
Yeah.
get. Okay, good. Let's keep it going.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
Hey, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Peter, what are you writing? Tell us about it.
Well, I'm a film and television major at Drexel. I'm a senior. So yeah, I mean, I try to write. I definitely should be doing it more often. I think I'm like, it's funny because, like, usually I'm really scared to write, or not, maybe not scared. I'm just, like, reluctant to, but I mean, just listening to all this, it just reminds me, like, it's wonderful. It's just like such a, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, sorry. It's touching. It's really, yeah.
it is one. Thank you for being here and for those comments.
Yeah.
Who else would like to say something or ask something? Nicole, did I see you put your hand up or no? Or
I didn't put my hand up, but I'll say something. I was just talking with Mr. Henson before, and just on behalf of all the students at St. Luke's, I think you've all really made a difference in our time at the school. And for being a senior, I am so happy that you're coming to graduation. When I sort of passed the word around that you were coming to graduation, every response I got was so cheerful, and each person I've spoken to is very, very excited to have you come. And I don't think any of us can really comprehend the fact that we're graduating yet, but
Okay.
given everything that's been happening with COVID, I think the fact that you can come to our graduation just makes it 10 times better.
And
So.
you know what, you and I get in that magic boat, right? And it'll take us wherever we want. I can't wait to see you, slap a hug on you.
We'll do a little handshake if
Ain't nobody like you. Ain't nobody like you.
Thank you, Mr. Henson.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
So where is St. Luke's? I'm not familiar with the
It's
school.
in New Canaan, Connecticut.
Ah, okay. All right.
Could I just say some faculty require their students to attend their events? I don't think that was necessary here.
Thanks.
Fabulous. Who else would like to join in the conversation? Do I see anyone else who would like to say something? Yeah, I see a gentleman, but his sign says Sarah Pinkerton. So.
Well, I'm working on my feminine side. And I am, so you can hear me.
Yes.
Well, I've known Bubba for quite a while, and started out with his earlier creative work. I was creative director in an ad agency, so we had some commonality. And then I started painting, so it sort of continued. But I hadn't heard any of his poetry in a very long time, and I'm quite taken by the strength of it, the storyline.
Me too, Bob.
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks
you,
for
guys.
inviting us.
I'm so glad you're here. I love you guys.
I love you, Bubby.
Love you.
It was great.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
You bet.
Anyone else like to say anything? No?
Well, Georgia,
Yes, Martin, of course.
I just wanted to tell Peter that I do remember publishing him in the magazine, but I don't remember the specific poem. But I also, it's wonderful for a teacher to hear from a student, and it's wonderful for an editor to hear from a writer years later.
Sure.
I want to prioritize it. It's wonderful for a parent to hear from a child. It's all the same kind of that wonderful give and take response. So, and maybe we can put in a pitch for little magazines because are open to poetry. I've retired from the editorship a few years ago, but I know the magazine is open to submissions, and I know other magazines are as well.
And Martin, your publication of my sequence led to a chapbook.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So again, my gratitude.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. If there are no other comments, I will say goodbye. Good afternoon. Thank you. It was a wonderful reading.
Georgia,
Yes,
Oh.
certainly.
Georgia, I'm a guest, and I just want to say, I'm calling from California, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to listen to these three poets. I am related to Martin, and I thank you very much, Martin, for making this link possible. I so thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope there is more of this. I'm living in I'm living in an old folks home. So, but I want to say that poetry is very popular here. And I was surprised to see that we have a group of people that meet in a poetry group, and it's one of the largest groups that there is. So I want to say all of you three guys have made a major impact on my life and many people's lives. I hope you all continue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shirley, for that.
Thank you for coming. And Georgia, thanks for putting this on.
Well, my thanks to all of our wonderful poets. And with that, enjoy the afternoon wherever you are.
Thank you,
Bye.
Georgia.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks, Georgia.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.